Thank you so much for tuning in. You are here on CMajor before the show, and we are very happy to be with you on this Saturday afternoon. Happy Passover, and I hope you're having a great Easter weekend. It's April 20th, 2019. I can't believe April is almost over with, and we are starting off today's podcast episode with some piano stories. We have some shout outs to do on today's episode. We're talking about chords because we're starting our whole new 12-week series on chords, and we have a new name for it. So the CMajor radio show is tomorrow, so we're going to be talking about that, and then I'll tell you what's coming up next week. But stay tuned. We have lots to talk about right here on CMajor before the show. Here with CMajor Porter here on CMajor before the show. Never mind all of the background noises you're going to be hearing in today's podcast. There's a lot of knocking going on. So it's summer. People are repairing things. People are getting ready for summer and music playing and things like that. So it's kind of a busy weekend, and it's a beautiful weekend. It started off raining this morning, but it looks like it's clearing up. And so I know a lot of my friends are going to be out and about. There's a lot of things going on. There's just a lot of things happening in the greater New York City area. So there's monster trucks this weekend. There's the New York Auto Show. Easter is this weekend. Passover started at sundown last evening. And so lots of friends doing lots of different things. And we're just happy to have you here. If you aren't able to hear us on the day that we podcast, then feel free to download on demand and just share it with your friends. Let your friends know that you are listening, and we really appreciate every single listener that we can have. Now, I want to start off today's podcast episode by sharing some piano stories. And you know what happens is that every week it shifts just a little bit, and it's only because I'm not sure how I want to start the podcast. Do I want to start with music? Do I want to start with stories? Do I want to start with shout-outs? Would I like to start with a lesson? I think what's going to happen is that we'll just keep shifting around because there's a certain flow to the podcast. And so I think overall we will continue just talking about the same things week after week and just putting a spin on it. So here we are. My first piano story that I want to share with you is, let me lower my music here a little bit. And again, you're going to hear somebody working next door, but that's okay. That happens. And so I had a student recently, believe it or not, who got his hand stuck in between the keys of a piano. Yes, and I have to play the laugh effect for that. How does someone do that? And I was talking with one of my colleagues who is also a leader when it comes to running a lesson studio. And she just said, maybe the hands of the student were just too small. I said, well, it happened. I looked up. His parents were there. They saw it all happen. And I just heard him just wail. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, my hand is stuck. It reminded me of that scene, in A Christmas Story where the guy gets stuck to the pole somehow. And it was just one of those things. And then finally he freed himself. And then he just left. So he wasn't in any extreme pain or anything like that. But I'm like, how does someone get their hand stuck in between the keys of a piano? I've never had a student do that before. So it was a very humorous moment for all involved. And let me just say this. I mean, there are lessons to be learned within lessons. And it just reminded me to talk with you about how you are placing your hands on the piano. Maybe some of you need to really know this. And this student knew. I think he was just trying something out. So he wasn't trying to play a glissando. He wasn't trying to do anything clever on the piano. It's just the way that he was leaning on the piano. But sitting at the piano is very important. So we talk about where to sit on the bench. We talk about how to sit tall on the bench. We talk about measuring your distance from the fall board. So if you don't know what fall board is, ask your teacher, if you are a student, to explain to you what fall board is. So some methods will actually show you pictures of this, and you can see how to make yourself the appropriate distance from the piano. So if you're sitting properly on a piano, you're really supposed to be sitting, I would say, from the middle to the edge of the bench, and not sitting back so far that you're hanging off the bench. And so if you find that you are too far away, what you can do is just extend your arms out, and then just make sure that your knuckles reach the fall board. And then you can move your bench or your seat to solve the problem if you find that you are just too far away. And so that's a good way to measure your distance. Some teachers may have a different way. They may even call it a pose, for instance. And so sitting at the piano, let me just say this, is not like sitting on a couch at home, a sofa, a chair, and you just have to be careful not to slouch, not to scrunch, not to put your elbows on the piano. Certainly don't put your toes on the piano unless you intend to play with your toes. I have some students that like to do that, and they think it's cute. And then I think I had a student trying to play with knuckles one time, or tried to play the piano with their elbows or something else, or a pen or some other object. And so just be careful of how you're treating the piano and careful of how you're sitting at the piano. It's important. It's important, and I think it's also important for teachers to demonstrate that and to explain proper posture, to explain proper hand positioning and so forth. So there are some easy, some surefire ways to measure where and how you sit in relation to the piano and to the keyboard. And just know this, any type of poor seating, any type of poor hand positioning may cause you some technical problems, like getting stuck in between the keys. It really happened, true story. So I may be sharing that story a little bit later on in other podcasts as it comes up, as we flash back to some of the topics that we've talked about. But one thing you can do is just do like an open-closed exercise, trying to remember that your fingers are supposed to be curved, keeping a flexible wrist. You don't want your wrist to be too high in the air and that type of thing. And so I think the pedagogy point of this is really working hard to have a developed, curved, natural, and relaxed hand position. That's going to be very important. Now, some would probably argue with that. Some performers, I have heard of a technique and a method that's taught where you keep your fingers flat. And there have been some famous pianists that were able to play the piano flat finger. I mean, I think that's up for debate. Can you play the piano well with flat fingers? I think it really depends on the length of your fingers and the technique that you're using. But what we use for beginning pianists and students that are just beginning to study is just try to remember to keep a flexible wrist and try to remember to keep a curved, natural, and relaxed hand. And I think you'll find that you'll be successful. Thank you. I'm glad that you agree with me on that. Now, my other piano story, and I think I've mentioned this just lightly a little bit, but I've had some students in the past that really insist on playing the piano with long nails. How do you play the piano with long cat nails? I don't know how you intend to do that. And so I would just say, try to keep your nails trimmed if you can, because it's going to matter later on, especially if you plan to go fast at the piano, if you're practicing your scales and so forth. You don't want to play the piano with nails clicking on the keys. But the funny thing about that is that you will see a picture of that on our podcast post. When we post an image that goes along with the podcast, you'll see a picture of one of the students that is enjoying, I would say, playing on very long nail tips, and so that her fingertips will not touch the keys. But the reason for that is that she has a lot of social events coming up, and she wants to keep her nails long for those events, and it's important to her. It's more for fashion. And I've had some adult students that are parents that do the same thing. It's just that in their work, they have to keep a certain look, and so they intend to take piano lessons with nail tips. That's just how it is. Our next piano story really has to do with wellness, and wellness is a topic that keeps coming up on this podcast because I'm really interested in knowing how music making keeps you well, how it helps to lower the stress in your life. How do you feel after you've played certain pieces? How do you feel after you played 20 minutes or 30 minutes here and there? And I'm happy to report that I had a student who's on his way to college-bound student, that plans to use music making to do just that, to relieve stress when he's feeling stressed when he's studying. This is a straight A student, a student that's going to one of the best colleges around, and it's outside of the greater New York City area, but still, he's going away from home. He knows that he's going to be having some stress levels that will need to be handled, need to be managed. And he already has a plan in place, and music is going to be part of his plan for handling the stress. So in the future, we may even have him come on and talk about some of that. I just think that's great that he's already thinking ahead, that maybe if he can't get outside to exercise or play sports, that piano would somehow take the place of just making him feel relaxed and making him feel good about getting on with life. So I just really admire this student. So yeah, I think that's great. I think that's worthy of applause. I mean, somebody who's already thinking ahead. He's so smart and so talented musically already, starting to share music with his friends, starting to find ways to play piano by ear as well as reading music, very open to learning both. And so I'm very happy about that. Now, I do have some shout outs. So this will be a period of applause and cheers. So what I'm going to do now is just pause for a moment, and I'll be right back. We're going to do our shout outs next. And you are listening to C Major Before the Show. You're here on CMajor Before the Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. And now we're going to go into our time of giving some shout outs to some very hardworking students. They are learning as much as they can when it comes to piano lessons and just really intending on making the best music they can make. And so the first shout out is to a student who is planning on playing theme music from Star Wars, which includes the Star Wars main theme. And also, his parents are encouraging him to play the theme from Darth Vader. So, as you know, it's part of the Star Wars music score. So, a shout out to that student. I think that's great. I mean, I try to follow Star Wars on social media just to see what's going on with that whole movie franchise and some of the new things that are coming out, and then just be able to converse with my students about the different things that are coming up regarding Star Wars, because they get excited about it. They get excited about the music. They get excited about the stories and the storyline. So shout out to that student, and also shout out to a few students that are studying Oh, Susanna. Now, why is this monumental? It's monumental because, first of all, if you know the history of Stephen Foster, who wrote the song, there are many arrangements of the song out there. Some are in the key of C, some are in the key of G, some are in other keys. It's easy to transpose if you understand the structure and you understand how the melody goes and the intervals that go along with that. But it just so happens that where they are in their piano methods, they are studying how to play the melody to Oh Susanna, as well as what the chord structure is, depending on the key that they're playing in. And they're learning to transpose, and they're also learning about upbeats. So, Oh Susanna, because of when it came about in its history, it may or may not be controversial, if I can use that word. But at the same time, there is still some positive things that you can get out of it. So, shout out to my students who are learning to play the piano by using our old traditional song, Oh Susanna. I do think that's great. I think that's worthy of applause and cheers because there's still some merit to the song. So my next shout out is for my students that are interested in studying the music of Beethoven. So I have students that have in the past talked to me about teaching them to play Moonlight Sonata, teaching them to play For Elise or For Elisa, if you prefer to pronounce it that way. But I have a student that is just really starting piano. I don't think he's been with the lesson studio for more than a month, and already he's figured out how to play For Elise by Beethoven. And it's the easy piano version, and then he wants to go on to learn the more authentic piano version. And so we will be helping him with that because he has a method that he's using that's going to push him further along a lot faster than someone else who's just starting piano, who knows nothing about music making at all. And we can do that because he already plays a wind instrument. So shout out to that student. Applause and cheers. And now I have one last shout out that I want to give, and that is a student who is very bold in his music making. He is learning to improvise and make up songs. He's using a C 5-finger position, and he's very comfortable moving around the piano, so that's not an issue for him. But the improvisation is something that his parents are encouraging, and he is really, really good at it. In fact, he started improvising and expressing himself so much I had to just stop him for a moment. I said, "Are you done?" He said, "A little bit longer." And he went for probably a few seconds longer, and then he ended. And he said, "Sorry about that. I really just had to get all of my expression out. There were just so many ideas coming to me in the moment." So it really was fascinating to watch the student. And so he's even comfortable with switching up melody and harmony in either hand at either point, and he knows exactly what he's doing. So shout out to that student. I think that's great. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is pause a little bit, just a few seconds, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about chords. I think you're going to like this. This is Chords For All, and you're listening to C Major Before the Show. Thank you for tuning in on this Saturday afternoon. You are here with CMajor Porter, and we are here on CMajor Before the Show, and we're talking about our new chord series. So all year long, that's all we're talking about. 2019 is all about chords, and then we'll figure out from there if we still want to keep up our conversation about chords. I think it's a worthy conversation because a lot of people, whether you realize it or not, are learning to play the piano by chords. We kicked off the beginning of this year with Piano for Parents, and we focused on chords. I really felt strongly about that because what I was seeing in my travels, and when I say travel, I really mean around the greater New York City area, just helping as many people as I can with their music making, a lot of which include parents. And so they were using chords for their music making. And I thought, it seems they're comfortable with using chords over playing melody, over learning the traditional way, and just really picking up songs by learning the structure of a song first, and then later on just really trying to read notes and learn the more formal way of playing the piano. So I said, okay, let's just go with the flow. So we're starting our 12-week series over. We're still focusing on chords. Rather than call it Piano for Parents, I'm going to call it Chords For All. And it really does go along with that theme. There's a very big academic focus that's out there. I won't name any institutions in particular, but it does seem to be a theme in academia to focus on creating pathways for all to flourish. And I agree with that. I agree with that whole effort, because what I'm finding is that it's not just the parents who are benefiting from chords, it's also young students as young as age 9 and up that I'm coming across at the lesson studio that are embracing learning to play the piano by chords. And one way that they've discovered chords for themselves is inside some of the primer methods. So if you know that word primer, it looks like primer. It looks like Primer, that you would say it as primer, but we pronounce it primer in music education. And so toward the end of this one method, in the first level, primer A, chords are taught, but they're taught mainly for the left hand to play chords while the right hand is playing melody. And then I had a student who was really struggling with that, and he just said, you know what, can I please just learn to play chords? And so we started working on chords, and then I found that other students really preferred that too. We got them a chord chart, and they are really just loving it. So I really think it is chords for all to flourish. How great would it be if everyone of all ages knew a little something about chords? In some societies, everyone knows a little something about composing. And so I don't think it's about overthinking your music making. I really think it's about just taking control of some of the sounds that really excite you. So whether or not you're playing the piano or having someone play for you, in the case of being a singer, being a session musician, you should be able to walk into that session. You should be able to walk into that room with the utmost confidence that whatever music is going to be made, you'll know exactly how it's made. That also helps if you're going into the studio with a producer or with an engineer. You should be able to tell that person, look, this is what I'm going to be doing, and I just need you to capture my best moments with the music making. I think it makes a difference. And so what I'm going to do now, I like to think about the different ways I can present chords every single time we introduce a series. So what I have now, I'm going to pause the music for just a moment. So as I turn my music down, I'm going to pull you into GarageBand. So if you happen to have an Apple computer, a laptop, what have you, there's a way to get into GarageBand so that you can show how to type music on your keyboard. And by keyboard, I mean the computer keyboard. So if you click on that feature, you would just go under Window and just click on musical typing, and it'll just pop right up. So, of course, it's odd for me as a pianist to play on a computer keyboard, but it's possible, and it's kind of fun to see how they've outlined it. So you can do that. So if you have that window open, you'll see musical typing, you'll see grand piano on stage. And by the way, I've had students that started taking piano lessons and they did not have a keyboard, and they used GarageBand to learn until they could show their parents they were serious enough for their parents to invest in getting them a keyboard. And so I think it's possible. If you really want to learn, you can learn. And then I've had students that didn't even use GarageBand at all. They just used a piece of paper, drew a picture of a keyboard like the one we're seeing now in GarageBand, and then just practice hand movements. So I think if you really want to learn, you can learn. So now what I'm seeing is that there's a keyboard in front of me. And so if you type the letter A, okay, you'll hear the note C as played and sounded on a piano. If you type the letter D, you'll hear an E. It sounds like an E that you would play on the piano. And then if you type G, it sounds like a G. But on the keyboard itself, if I play all these notes together, that's a C chord. But what I've typed is actually A, D, and G. And then I love that the tab functions as a sustain. So listen to this. So I'm holding down the tab key, which functions as a sustain pedal. How cool is that? So now I'm going to play a C chord, and now I'm going to go to an F chord. Okay, so it's an F chord. And if you see it on the keyboard, you'll see F, H, K. And now I'm going to go to play a G chord, okay, which on the keyboard looks like G, J, L. So for my students who like to joke around, if I say, how many letters are in the music alphabet? They'll go 26. I'm like, are you sure about that? And so sometimes they'll joke around and say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and they'll just keep going. And so we laugh about it, but if you look at this keyboard, you would think, oh, how do you spell a C chord? A, D, G. How do you spell an F chord? F, H, K. And how do you spell a G chord? G, J, L. You have to laugh about that. So I think it's important to keep an open mind. So I would say practice this week if you can. This is going to be your homework. Yes, I'm going to be posting this a little bit later over at CMajor's Classroom. So join us at CMajorPorter.com. And if you can't join us over there, join us at our page on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page that is public, CMajor Before the Show. And I'm happy to post some information over there as well. But it's all in fun. It's all in good fun. So our chords, to start our Chords For All series, Chords For All to Flourish, will be C, F, and G this week. So your job is to find C, F, and G, however you can find it, and then see if you can make music with it. So come up with your own sequence. Start to Google search maybe some songs that use those chords. Try to make some fun rhythms. Whatever it is, just make it up and have fun with it. I could give you some songs, but I'm just going to resist doing that. I'm going to resist doing that because I think that for the students that work with me in person, that they feel that by coming to the lesson studio, or in some cases have me come to them, they feel privileged to have that experience and to be able to have those discussions in person. But I think on a podcast, that if we just say, you know what, limit yourself to just playing C, F, and G, find a way to do it on your keyboard, on your actual keyboard, on the computer, on a laptop, on a desktop, or in some cases your mobile phone, if you pull up GarageBand, if you happen to have an iPhone, or you can find a piano where you can find a piano. You can go to a music store. You can go to, in some cases, I have students that use the pianos at their schools. And so there are other students that have had to practice at a neighbor's house. But see what you can do on your own with C, F, and G, and that's going to be your homework assignment. So if you have a chord chart, pull out your chord chart as well. So I'm looking at the one that is very popular with my students. It just says piano chords. There is a column that says major, minor, seventh, augmented, diminished. And then on the very left of those columns, you see key. And what that does is just lists all the different keys that are in ABC order. But if you go down the column, you will see a C major chord. And it's just red dots, really. If you're using black and white key relationship, you'll see that C is to the left of your two black keys. 1, 2, C is there. So if I play that using the keyboard, I'm going to play 1, 2, C is there. And then, if I want to play the next key, I'm going to skip a white key as pictured. Okay, and then I'm going to go. Okay, but I just played an F. I did not play a G, but I did that for a reason, because in piano sometimes you look at black and white keys and you can see where the guide notes are. Okay, so if you think 1, 2, C is there to the left of your two black key group, and then 1, 2, 3, F is there, but if you can find F, you can find G. And then if you just think, okay, play a key, skip a white key, play the next key, skip a white key, play the next key. And then you have a C chord, and you can see how it's outlined. So our definition of a chord would be 3 notes with a space between each note. You can use that. And also start looking inside of your chord finder books if you happen to have that. And if you say, well, CMajor, how are you getting all these different resources? We have a syllabus that's posted. It's over at Music Glue. So if you go to musicglue.com/CMajor Porter, you should see the syllabus over there, which is available to download for no cost to you. It is free. I think because Music Glue makes it possible for artists like myself to show what I'm doing in the music community, that they only ask that you offer your information so that they can send you information or just stay in contact with you. And who knows, maybe you may end up on Music Glue yourself. You may find some use for it. So you just may be asked to give your first name or your first and last name and your email address, and that's it. But you can download the syllabus over there. And if you have any questions about what's in the syllabus or have further questions, feel free to get in touch with us online. We are available on Twitter. We're available on Facebook. And so we try to limit ourselves to the platforms that we use online, because we want to stay available and focused as needed for those who have questions about the classroom, who have questions about the course. So for now, we're just using the podcast, which I find very useful, and I'm still looking forward to speaking with our lessons expert / lessons administrator. So I talked with her staff recently, and they say, yes, she is definitely still interested in talking with us here on the podcast. She may be issuing a statement instead, just to outline her philosophy when it comes to running a music studio, running a lessons program. So we're still open to all of that, but just know that this course really is to give you an introduction to playing the piano and playing the piano by chords. So we will cover some of the fundamentals. We kind of want you to become comfortable with spelling the chords if you can. We're not reading music on the staff. That is reserved for the CMajor radio show, which I will be speaking about coming up in a moment. But it is about just reviewing some of the fundamentals that you will find if you are learning to play by chords first. And one of the things that my students like to do, they like to do this. They like to see how fast they can play. So whether it's chords, getting to the chords at the right time and that kind of thing, we tend to focus on that too and just have fun. But it really is about harmony. It's not so much about composition and analysis, but it is about finding a sequence that you're comfortable with and then maybe trying to write your own order of chords that makes sense to you. So however you can make the best music, you can make just make the best music that's, in the words of one of my students, easy for you to make, and then just go for it. So what we're going to do now, we're going to turn our music back up. We're going to pause for just a moment. We're going to step away from GarageBand, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the CMajor radio show and what's coming up on that on tomorrow. So you are here on CMajor Before the Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter, and we're going to be back in a moment. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're here on CMajor Before the Show, and we're continuing our discussion tomorrow on chords, and we will talk about the CMajor radio show right now, telling you what's coming up on tomorrow's podcast. So, as you know, the CMajor radio show has moved. We used to be over on Blog Talk Radio, and then we decided to come over here, just seeing how it goes. And then if all goes well, and we're able to move successfully over onto this platform, then we'll just continue to build that show in a way that helps those who are interested in writing music. So, for instance, if you have an interest in analysis, if you have an interest in writing down what you're listening to, if you are interested in tonal theory, for instance, then that's going to be the platform, that's going to be the show for you. And we are on the same platform here on Spreaker, so I'm very happy to be over here. And so the CMajor radio show tomorrow will continue with our discussion of C, F, and G, but we will be talking about how to write those chords down. What would it look like if you put it on a staff? We have several resources here, and what I like is that the resources all differ. So some of the resources will show you C, F, and G on a grand staff, what it would look like hands together. Some will show you what it looked like just for the right hand in the treble clef. And others will show you what it looked like if you played in the bass clef, and then talk about playing those in inversion. So I think it's important to learn how to write down music clearly, but in different ways. So if you see it, you're not so shocked, and you would know exactly how it's ordered, how it's put together. So we're becoming a little bit better at giving you the different ways that you will see that, and also help you to choose the resources that you would like to use. So there are a lot of music theory books out there. I was looking at a couple today that I just ran across in a retail setting, and I just thought, wow, this just looks so intimidating when you open this book. For someone who may be looking at something like that for the first time, I just can't even imagine what's going through their mind. It must be really daunting to see all of these dots on the page and then just not know how you're going to get through them. And then just some of the exercises in those books just are so challenging. I mean, seeing something that was copyrighted in the 60s versus something that was copyrighted in the 90s, and the approach is pretty much the same. Do this, do that, start this exercise, start that exercise with no real explanation. It lets you know right away you will need a music teacher to help you get through those things. But what we wanted to do was give you on the syllabus some books to study, which to me, are so clear in plain language, explaining everything. It's like building blocks, how music builds from one thing to the next. So that's what we try to do. We try to give you resources that will really help you understand, so you have a conversation about music and how it's all put together. But tomorrow, tune in if you can, the CMajor radio show. I can't say what time we're going to be on because we may decide to go on in the afternoon, or we may wait until early evening. Why? Because there is a lot going on this weekend in the greater New York City area. We have the New York International Auto Show this weekend, and there are some lessons going on with me and my students, believe it or not, because not all of my students celebrate Easter. Some of them celebrate Passover. Some of them don't celebrate Easter or Passover. And so if they ask for lessons, then I try to accommodate that. So me personally, I grew up celebrating Easter. So I also am interested in the New York International Auto Show because I've been there in the past. So if you are my friend and you happen to be on my private Facebook page, you've probably seen me post some photos of what's going on with that show. So I hope to get over to this year's show either this weekend or next weekend just to see what's going on, even if I'm just an outsider and I just happen to pass by and see some of the great exhibits, because over the last couple of years, there's this one particular company that's done a fantastic job of making it very fun for you to see the exhibit as well as take part in riding on this thing that looks like basically a safari trip where you're going up, you're going down, and it's just fun. You hear a lot of people having fun with their families. There's squeals, and it's like a fun ride. And so, I don't know. If I go, I would definitely tell you that I went. And so, New York International Auto Show, monster trucks. I talked about that. Some of my friends are going to monster trucks. And I ran across some other friends that were talking about monster trucks, and they said if you go, just make sure you wear some sort of ear protection, hearing protection, because you will need it. It's super, super loud. So the other place I hope to visit, and I visited once, I did visit, and it's the new roastery that's out, and I don't say the name of this coffee company very often here on the podcast, but it's by Starbucks. So if you happen to go to the new Starbucks roastery, it is something to see. I believe it's 23,000 square feet of just nothing but coffee and everything having to do with Starbucks coffee, but it's very fantastic. So I may be over in that area and happen to go over there as well. So I'm excited about that because I thought I was going to have to go to Italy just to experience a roastery. But it's nice to know it's right here in New York. And I'm very grateful to the friends who have given me little small gifts. And sometimes my students give me little small gifts too. Just a couple dollars here and there, $5 to say, you know what? We like what you're doing with your music making. We really appreciate your energy. Here, go buy yourself a cup of coffee. So I really appreciate that. They know how much I am into coffee culture. So I really appreciate that. Now, next week, here on CMajor Before the Show, we're going to talk about that. Let's pause for a moment. And you are here on CMajor Before the Show. I'll be back in a moment. so much for listening to CMajor Before the Show. We are rounding out our episode for today, and the weather just keeps getting more and more beautiful. And so people are starting to come out a little bit more and enjoy the outside weather, and it's becoming more and more sunny. It's really exciting to see. Spring is really here, and that means summer is not too far away. But next week, if you happen to join us, please join us right here for our discussion, Chords For All series with D, E, and A. So our Chords For All series, our CFA series, continues. And so we'll call today's episode, Oh Say Can You Play C, F, and G. So look for that as we post that on our description of today's episode. And then I hope to see you next week. So until then, try to make the best music you can make, and check out what other educators are doing. Check out what they're doing online. And we will do the same. There's a friend, I won't say friend to the show because he hasn't been on the podcast just yet, but I was hoping to have him as a guest. And so I know that he does a lot of great work when it comes to music education. He offers clinics. He offers now master classes and recitals in the greater New York City area. And I believe he's got something coming up in Brooklyn pretty soon. But if you have a chance to go out and see the legendary living color drummer Will Calhoun, I would say percussionist, but he's professional in every area of drumming that you can imagine. So definitely one of the thought leaders in music making of our time. Get out and go support what he's doing. And we hope to see you tomorrow on this platform on the CMajor Radio Show online. You've been listening to CMajor Before the Show. And let me just say this. If you listen to the CMajor Radio Show online tomorrow, we will also try to mention our poll, because the future of polling means that you're polling live. You're polling along with the posting of something on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. And we're trying to make polling a little bit more interactive on this podcast and our sister podcast. So poll everywhere is where we're headed. And so I think what I'm going to do is make that a little bit more part of the CMajor Radio Show. I want to know your thoughts as we learn to write down music clearly. And also, I will keep the same theme of music making and wellness. That's still going to be an integral part of both of our podcasts. So either way, we're making music here on the podcast, encouraging you to make the best music you can make, writing down music, and don't forget to visit us over at CMajor's Classroom for your homework assignment. And we want you to take care and have a nice evening. I'll see you next time right here on CMajor Before the Show.